Hey there, Internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we sit down with guests to talk about a Disney Plus offering of their choosing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with your friends. Joining me today, we have Cameron Abbott back again. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is going on? And joining us, we have a very special guest, Robert Mimms of Session Zero. How are you doing, Robert?
I'm just great. How are you?
Doing all right. So because we don't often have, or we haven't yet often had a lot of guests coming in here, I have in the past forgotten to give the guests the chance to kind of plug who they are and what they do up front. So going to not do that this time. So tell us, Robert, a little bit about who you are, where people can find you on Twitter, what Session Zero is, before we dive into the topic of the show.
Sure. Well, like you said, my name is Robert, and you can find me on Twitter. It's probably best if you go to Session Zero's Twitter because I have enough followers, and we don't over there. So it's sesh, SESH _ZERO, sesh zero. And we are a podcast where we talk about Dungeons and Dragons and making characters, because that's always been kind of our favorite part about, tabletop RPGs and everything like that, was trying to figure out what's going on and why characters kind of act the way they do and everything like that. So we made a whole show about it, and it's a real good time. We come out every Wednesday, and you can find us on podcast services around the globe.
Very cool. Yeah, I was when I was looking into bringing you on, I saw that and I was like, oh, cool, because Cameron has floated the idea of us doing like a tabletop RPG kind of show or something like that, and I have told him in the past, I'm like, yeah, I played Dungeons and Dragons once in elementary school, but then I got for like weeks afterwards obsessed with like creating my own character sheets for games and campaigns that I never played again or anything like that.
100%.
I would spend hours and hours, and I would like grab graph paper and I would like build maps and stuff like that, and just like build all these campaigns in my head without having anybody to actually play the game with. So I saw that and I was like, oh, that's like what I was doing 25 years ago.
Yeah, we'll have you on the podcast. It'll be a real good time, and then we'll play some D&D together as well.
Yeah. So we are here today to talk about Robert's show of choice, and that is Boy Meets World. Robert, you were one of the very first people to reach out through the Google form that we have at thatnerdysite.com/D+guest, and you basically were like, I want to talk about all of Boy Meets World, and I was like, that's gonna be way too much for me to actually watch. And it was also, you were one of the first ones that basically was like, I want to do a TV show, and I was like, okay, well, how do we figure out how to do a TV show? And so now that we've had a few of them to get under our belt, it seemed like the right time to reach back out to you, get you on, and basically we said, hey, let's look at a few episodes in particular. So specifically today, you have chosen the episodes Back to School, which is season 2, episode 1. Season 3, episode 20, I Never Sang for My Legal Guardian. Season 5, episode 17, And Then There Was Sean. And season 6, episode 19, Be True. And part of the reason Cameron is here is because like a week or two back, Cameron was also like, hey, let's do Boy Meets World. I've been watching a lot of that, and I was like, I already have somebody that wants to do Boy Meets World, so it was a nice, perfect coalition. So first, Robert, tell me why Boy Meets World was kind of your pick, and then a little bit into why these specific 4 episodes.
Sure, definitely. Well, first off, Boy Meets World is, depending on the day you ask me, my favorite television show of all time. It's probably the show I've watched the most, believe it or don't, because growing up, it was always on channel number 39, where I grew up. And just like every day there was 2 episodes. They ran through all 7 seasons, then just started over again at 1. And it was just incredible. It just happened all the time. So me and my sisters would just constantly have Boy Meets World going. And it just became kind of the show that all 3 of us, regardless of, age or interest differences, kind of always loved together. Because my oldest sister is, 6 years older than I am. So it was rare that our kind of like watching habits lined up, but this one was kind of right in the pocket for all of us.
Mm-hmm. And how old are you?
I'm 20. I'll be 26 in 2 weeks. So
okay. Because
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm 35, and this was a show that I watched basically as it was airing on TGIF, and so it was it hit right in that sweet spot where I was, more or less I was a couple years younger than Corey, but it was still like a show I could look up to and kind of see myself in.
Oh, sure, definitely. Like um, I remember new episodes coming out when I was very, very young, of like the late college years when they, towards seasons probably 6 and 7. I saw when they were coming out, but everything else of that was reruns after that. And it coming to Disney Plus was, a lovely thing. But I one of my sisters gave me probably the best gift I've ever received, was all 7 seasons on DVD. So whenever I don't
Nice.
have internet or something, I crack those bad boys out.
Nice. And then real quick, I guess before we hop into why these specific episodes, Cameron, what's your kind of relationship and history with Boy Meets World?
My relationship and history with Boy Meets World is interesting because I came into, like, my cognizance of Boy Meets World is a mix between, I remember when Disney started airing Boy Meets World reruns, distinctly, because I had never, like, this was during the time when ABC had Boy Meets World as one of the cornerstones of TGIF, and it was ongoing during that time. And so when it was carried over, I was like, "Oh, this will be cool." And then it starts off with season 1, which was super weird to me because I'd never seen season 1. I had never seen them in quote unquote elementary school, doing this entire thing, and so
What
it ended up.
Oh, sorry.
Hmm?
It's a weird transition, right? When you see like all of them as like, you know, actors in their early mid 20s, and then you go back and you see them when they're like 8 and 9, and or probably 10
Well,
to
so if
13.
from where they're at, and if I recall correctly, um, Savage and so the Savage age crew was roughly about 10 or 11 when the show started.
Oh, okay, sure.
Um, oh no, sorry, they were like 11 and 12.
So this is like hopping ahead to one of the little trivia notes in this. They actually skip like 2 years of school over the course of the series. In the first season, I want to say there. Let me pull up the trivia in particular. Corey, Sean, and Topanga skip 9th and 10th grade. In season 1, they're in 6th grade. In season 2, they're in 7th grade. In season 3, they're in 8th grade, and then in season 4, they're in 11th grade. So yeah, they just like they at that point they were like, okay, these kids are now too, like, they needed to age them up because of how old the actors were starting to look.
But also because of the adult.
Typically when you
or-
cast,
yeah.
hey, we're gonna cast you as a 10-year-old, you're casting a 13 or 14-year-old to play 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Right.
And
so
it's even more reflected in the fact that, like, the stories they started to tell
yeah.
were a bit too heavy for like 14-year-olds to go through.
Yeah.
I thought that was actually pretty interesting. The kind of, because I remember and I recall like the very special episodes that like there's quite a few Boy Meets World episodes that are pretty much considered very special episodes that aren't designated, like, because the show will usually have like maybe 1 or 2. Boy Meets World has a gambit of very special episodes that just are nuts.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, I feel like it's 1 to 3 times a season towards the end of things that they just like, we're just gonna do this one concept for an episode, and it's gonna be insane, but we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
not only that, but we're going to also be very real about it. Like, there's an episode that Disney never aired where it looks like Sean's dating this girl and they're engaging in a very physical relationship, but in reality, she's spending the night at his place because she can't go home or else her dad will beat her.
Right.
Yeah, there's a couple episodes, again, you're making me jump ahead in trivia, but there
Sorry.
were 3 episodes, I think, that never aired on Disney. The episodes Boy Meets World, Promises, If You Can't Be with the One You Love, and The Truth About Honesty were banned from airing on Disney Channel due to their frank discussion about premarital sex and teen drinking. Probably one of them was also about like physical abuse, but they are all present here on Disney Plus.
Well, it's interesting. Oh, really? So they're all on Disney Plus.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
I,
cool.
I I looked that up after we talked about that a couple weeks ago because you were like, yeah, there are some that just aren't on Disney Plus, and I had a similar conversation with Robert back when he reached out about this initially, because he was like, yeah, they're not all there, and I was like, I think they are, because I went through and just kind of like bladed through all of the show's pages at the time, and sure enough, yeah, you like all the episodes are there in Disney Plus. They might I haven't like looked through them all to see if they're like heavily edited or censored or something like that, but
Well, I
they're
think
there.
it's also the times have changed a lot since
True.
when. Because also it's important to note that TGIF was showing Boy Meets World in prime time. Disney Channel was showing Boy Meets World after school.
Mm-hmm.
So the time differences are say a lot about kind of the age range they were putting the show in front of.
Oh, certainly.
But also like, and times of course have changed about the concept of premarital sex. But I'm even the one about abusing the daughter. The reason why it was brought up in the first place is because she was spending the night at Sean's house and people thought that they were engaging in a premarital sexual relationship. So that was the initial focus of the show before the switch and the revelation that actually no, he's just trying to help out a girl who's getting terrorized by her father. And
Yeah.
it's like it's so when I say like the show runs its gambit of we're gonna have these really fun lighthearted episodes about like Corey not being first string on the basketball team and what does that mean, and what does that mean and how does that impact his relationship with Sean, who is a starter, and like all this stuff, and like, oh, but it's okay because at the end of the game he comes off the bench and it's like this big awesome moment for Corey. To Sean's mom not only leaves the family but takes their home because it's a mobile home. She literally doesn't just up and leave the family. She up and leaves the family with the house.
Right. And that's
And
And then the dad runs after.
then the Dan runs off after her to try to like find her and leaves Sean in custodial limbo.
and that's something we'll I guess we'll get at when we talk about the second episode. But Chet Hunter is one of those interesting characters in this show where like he is like ostensibly not a good father. But is treated as like the most heartwarming, like congenial man in the entire world, whilst at the same time being like, oh no, I can't be around my son because I have to go chase after my wife. Like it's a very interesting dichotomy of like, we're going to tackle this really serious issue, but we're also going to give you this kind of like larger than life, almost clownish character to go along with it.
Yeah, when I was watching that second episode, it had all the trappings of like the very special episode that Cameron's talking about, and I immediately was like, because it's watching all of these episodes, I was like, I've seen all of these episodes probably 2 or 3 times from my own youth and growing up and reruns and stuff. And so like so much of it was just like flooding back to me. And that episode, I didn't remember like where the storyline ended and everything. And so like I was going through my head, I'm like, oh, this is basically the Boy Meets World's version of the Fresh Prince episode of where Will Smith's character like is basically abandoned by his dad, right? And that's what my head's thinking.
Sure.
And so when it doesn't end like that, and it does end with like them reuniting, like I know in the history of the show it's not going to be a long reunion, but it was still like this is a very special episode that will like continue into the rest of the season kind of thing.
Right. It's very rare that Boy Meets World has a plot point or a problem that isn't solved that episode. I think I Never Sang for My Legal Guardian, the second episode we'll talk about, is one of the instances in which that kind of problem is elongated over an entire arc with Jonathan and Sean and how their relationship kind of evolves.
Yeah. So yeah, dive into then kind of why these particular episodes, Robert.
So okay, so we'll talk. So like you said, Back to School, I Never Sang for My Legal Guardian, and then there was Sean, and then Be True. The easy one is, and then there was Sean. I don't think I could get through a Boy Meets World podcast or conversation without bringing up that episode. It is far and away the best episode of Boy Meets World. And then Back to School, I think, is really interesting and necessary because it is, kind of still in their early days when they're young and they're goofy and they still have, and Corey and Sean's relationship, while it doesn't mature too much, is still kind of in this like very immature stage. It heightens the relationship of them and George Feeney, with them being so relieved to be away from him, and then he shows back up as the principal. It also introduces Jonathan Turner, who's an exceptionally interesting and important character for that era of their lives, and we'll see why in the next episode. And then it introduces Corey's need to be cool, but inability to pull that off. Like, I don't think Corey is cool more than maybe a handful of times throughout the entire series. And Johnny Baboon certainly isn't one of them.
Very true.
And then, as far as I Never Sang for My Legal Guardian, I think we've talked a lot about already why it's important. Is it really shows Sean's. It's one of the first times that you get an episode that's like kind of just about Sean, and it's about how he and his family are kind of dealing with his mother leaving and his father kind of chasing after her, and him kind of always feeling like he's left in that kind of limbo where no one's thinking about him first. He's just kind of being left by the wayside. And then Jonathan Turner, like, wanting to do the right thing, but at the same time wanting to live his own life and having this kind of difficult choice to make there. So I think that's a kind of an important episode for that era as well. And then there was Sean as a very special episode for a different reason. In that it is one of those concept episodes I mentioned earlier where they just decide we're going to do a slasher movie. Mm-hmm. And it's going to not only be incredible and like one of the bigger kind of departures that we make from our like normal structure, but also it is at the end going to dive into, more of the, kind of emotional core of the show, which is like why or kind of how Corey and Topanga have kind of everyone else wrapped up in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was as somebody who with Community coming to Netflix recently, I've been like just rewatching that whole show, which I love very dearly, and it struck me like just how much of a Community type of episode And Then There Was Sean was, because it very much is like, we're going to use the framework of a slasher film to tell a more like grounded story of what Sean is going through as a result of the breakup of Corey and Topanga there. And I was like, oh, like this would have felt right at home in like the mind of Dan Harmon or something like that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agreed. I think that that is part of why it, has the lasting and staying power that it does, is that is them probably just like letting loose and saying, what can we do with this kind of formula that we have, and how can we push and pull the tropes that we've kind of set up for the world, and then also observed from horror movies, and how can we marry those two things. Mm-hmm. And then the last one, Be True. It's probably a weird one for those of you listening who love Boy Meets World, like I do. Be True is a terrible episode of Boy Meets World, but you need a terrible episode of Boy Meets World because there are not good episodes of Boy Meets World. Like, it's not like every episode is gold, but it shows,
especially towards the end. Especially towards the end.
Exactly, and that's part of why is towards the end they just get insane, and they don't really consider like why. Like, one of the things I have in my notes is, why is Dean Bolander, the dean of a college, talking about her love life with some college sophomores? Like, it's just, and not to mention the whole Indiana Jones like side character and everything like that. Like, Be True is a necessary episode to look at because it shows just how far down the rabbit hole they're willing to go for something that may not be worth it.
Yeah. And like, one of the things I loved about that episode that we'll get into a little bit more later is like how they even poke fun at their own like formulaic nature of that episode, with Corey and Sean basically being like, oh, we're doing, a traditional Corey Sean hijinks kind of thing. Yep. And then it gets to the point where they're just like doing the thing and giving the play-by-play on it in the same moment. So yeah, it was a fun quartet of episodes to revisit here for this episode. So before we dive into a little bit more talking about them with like specifics and stuff, here's the history lesson we dive into every episode. Boy Meets World was originally released between September 24th, 1993, and then it ran up and through May 5th, 2000, up through Cinco de Mayo. For these 4 episodes in particular, Back to School was the season 2 premiere, September 23rd, 1994. I Never Sang for My Legal Guardian came out May 3rd, 1996. And then There Was Sean was February 27th, 1998. And Be True was April 9th, my sister's birthday, 1999. She turned 12 on that day. Other notable releases at the time, I basically just pulled from the TGIF block of shows that we've kind of already alluded to. You had Family Matters, which ran in the TGIF block, or ran between 1989 and 98, many years of that in the TGIF block. Step by Step was in there from 91 through 98, and then Sabrina the Teenage Witch for 1996 through 2003. And I'm pretty sure at least one of those has like crossover episodes with Boy Meets World, if not multiple of those, because that was the era that was like the height of TGIF was in the 90s, when they would be like, hey, we've got these 4 shows, let's like do cross promotion between them so we can get people who are watching, you know, Two Guys, a Girl, in a Pizza Place to watch Boy Meets World, or vice versa, or something like that.
Right. There's definitely a Halloween episode where Sabrina shows up.
Yeah.
In Boy Meets World.
Runtime is 23-minute episodes, and I didn't really bother sliding where this falls in the Disney timeline of things, because it was just a Disney show of the 90s. I guess a precursor of it would have been Dinosaurs, was a couple years before Boy Meets World started. And then, of course, this came many years before Girl Meets World would end up being rebooted. Little bit of the roll call for the series. You have the creators are Michael Jacobs and April Kelly. Michael Jacobs had created Charles in Charge, My Two Dads, and the aforementioned Dinosaurs going into this, and then he would later come back and kind of create the reboot series Girl Meets World that ran from 2014 to 2017. April Kelly had written this jumped out at me because as a female writer, especially in like the 70s and 80s, it was a significantly harder industry to break into. So the fact that she had 15 writing credits on the series Mork and Mindy jumped out at me. And then
who doesn't love
was a
Mork
co-creator
and
on was a co-creator on this show, and then also a co-creator on Girl Meets World. The directors of these 4 episodes in particular, David Traynor directed the first 2, Back to School and Legal Guardian. He directed 45 episodes overall of the Boy Meets World run. Jeff McCracken, who directed And Then There Was Sean, directed 51 episodes. So between the 2 of them, that's well over half the series, probably about 2/3 of the series run. And Jeff McCracken in particular, he directed the most of any other director on the show. And then the 3rd episode, Be True, or the 4th episode rather, Be True, was directed by Mickey Dolenz, who only overall directed 2 episodes of the show, but he was also one of the monkeys, and they had that weird little like 3/4 of the monkeys were reunited in the season 3 episode Rave On, because one of the monkeys played Topanga's dad before later getting like recast by 2 other actors and stuff, and Mickey Dolenz plays like 2 different characters over the course of the show. There's some weird casting stuff, but it was like I just remember that being a thing, and my parents, like when I would watch this, my parents telling me who the monkeys were. And this was also around the time that the Brady Bunch movie came out, which also celebrated the monkeys and Davy Jones in particular. And so it was like it was a weird like mesh where I was like, oh, I get this, I get what they're doing with this reunion, but as a 12-year-old 14-year-old kid that I was like, I shouldn't care this much about the monkeys. But I had the right blend of pop culture was starting to coalesce around them. Like I watched the monkeys on like Nick at Night, I'm sure, growing up, and then my parents also had been fans of them. So yeah, it was just like seeing that he was attached to that Be True episode. I was like, oh, that's right. It just brought back all of those monkey ties.
These notes continue to really make me happy that I picked Be True, because this fact I didn't know until just now. But I almost picked the episode in which the monkeys reunite on Boy Meets World, because it is one of the most ridiculous episodes. Like what is his name? Michael Nesmith just shows up at their house and decides that he is one of Amy and Alan's friends from Europe, and then just like stays there for a long time. And his name is Reginald Fairfield, and like Oh, it's a ridiculous episode, but Mickey Dolenz, I had no idea, was a part of this one, and I am so glad that he is.
Yeah. Yeah. We had 4 different writers across these episodes. You had David Kendall, who wrote Back to School. This was his only Boy Meets World episode, and he also came back years later to write an episode of Girl Meets World. He wrote the movie The New Guy, if anybody remembers that. That was the movie with DJ Qualls.
Oh, shit. Yeah, of course.
Where he gets so embarrassed out of, school or whatever that he recreates himself at like the opposing high school or whatever. I was like, oh my God, I totally remember seeing that movie and then seeing it like a million more times on like FX or something like that growing up. So David Kendall wrote that. And then he also created the series Melissa and Joey with Melissa Joan Hart and Joey Lawrence, who are, tied to Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and Joey Lawrence being the bigger brother of Andy Lawrence, who was a regular on this series. Kevin Kelton directed Legal Guardian. He ended up writing 4 episodes of Boy Meets World over the course of the show. He was most notably probably an SNL writer from 83 to 85. Jeff Mennel wrote And Then There Was Sean. Overall, he wrote 18 episodes of Boy Meets World and then came back for 8 episodes of Girl Meets World. And then David Brownfeld wrote Be True and 3 other episodes. He wrote 4 total episodes of Boy Meets World. He was this just jumped out at me on his IMDb page because one of his other credits was he was a story editor on a TV show called Over the Top, specifically an episode titled The Bee Story. And I was like, did this just guy get like pigeonholed into bee stories? But this one in particular was about a spelling bee, not African killer bee.
I was about to say that guy took one concept and stretched it out over 2 different shows.
Yeah,
talk about making a payday last.
That was immediately what I thought. I was like, did he that's impressive? But then looking into it, yeah, I did like that extra little step of research to figure out what that was about. And then he's currently an executive producer on all of like the Chicago PD, Chicago Med, and Chicago Fire shows. So he's probably making bank.
The shows that your parents watch.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Starring, so we're gonna go through kind of the big picture starring first here, and then kind of dive into a few notable standouts from each of the 4 episodes in particular. Obviously, Ben Savage as Corey, younger brother to Fred Savage, and then he would later come on and reprise his role as Corey Matthews for Girl Meets World. And this just jumped out at me. Recently, he has been very typecast as a young Mandy Patinkin in both the TV show Criminal Minds. He has played basically like young Mandy Patinkin's character on that a couple times, and in Homeland most recently, he played a young Saul, which is also played by Mandy Patinkin.
What?
So it's just like they have identified, which also weirdly ties into obviously Princess Bride, given that Fred Savage is the kid in that, and Mandy Patinkin
that's a weird
Montoya.
That's where my mind is tracing right now, and I'm like, that is the weirdest connection I can think of.
Yeah, it's just
it's all of the Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You didn't know that?
What? No, I had no idea.
Dude, who'd you think it was?
I didn't know. I just never thought about him. I mean,
when I was
obviously,
a little kid,
I
thought young Mandy Patinkin and Antonio Banderas were the same person for far too long until my adulthood. I think I was like 16, and I was like, yeah, well, Antonio Banderas, and my brother's like, wait, what? You mean Mandy Patinkin? I was like, the old guy from Criminal Minds? What? No. And it's like, and then it hit me. It's like, that's right, because timeline-wise, it doesn't match up.
Yeah.
So crazy.
Ryder Strong plays Sean, and he would later come back and do 7 episodes of Girl Meets World. Sean, one of the other things I remember him seeing advertisements for, never saw the movie because it's not my cup of tea, but Cabin Fever was like a horror film that he did that I remember getting like some kind of renown after Boy Meets World was all done. I figured
it's all right. I mean, it's the Stephen King film, right?
I didn't know it was Stephen King. I just know that it's just about like this disease.
Yeah, it's a disease, and the whole thing. Anyway, there's a whole thing about it that it's actually like it ties into some of the greater Stephen King lore, which is cool. But I mean, outside of that,
Sure. You have Danielle Fishel playing Topanga here. She would, of course, later reprise her role on Girl Meets World. She was in a movie, Dorm Days. That was another one like that. Like both of them, both Ryder Strong and Danielle Fishel. I remember like seeing advertisements for those movies, being like, I'm never gonna watch that movie, but it's cool seeing Boy Meets World people like doing other things. So and that like Dorm Days in particular, I think was one of those like raunchy college teen fest things. So it's like, okay, whatever. Will Friedle probably has had the most prolific career of anybody post Boy Meets World. Plays Eric Matthews, of course. Went on to be Terry McGinnis, aka Batman in Batman Beyond. He was Ron Stoppable in Kim Possible. He was Lion-O in the Thundercats of 2011-2012. He played Bumblebee in the Transformers from 2014-2017. And then he would later come back and do 4 episodes of Girl Meets World, including one of those episodes that he wrote. And I remember hearing that in his We Have Cool Friends over with our friends at Kinda Funny. Basically talking about that was one of the reasons he agreed to come back and do that show, was they gave him the opportunity to write one of the episodes, because that's kind of where his passions lie right now.
By the way, if you haven't seen that episode of We Have Cool Friends over at Kinda Funny, youtube.com/kindafunny, it is a phenomenal episode. It is
in the extra credit for this episode, and I'll have the link in the description below and everything.
So good.
Also, yep. Will Friedle now works with Critical Role a lot, doing miniatures and everything. So that kind of ties him back to the whole D&D universe.
There you go. Yeah,
he's a super cool dude.
You love it.
Yeah. William Daniels, Mr. Feeney, had done Knight Rider from 1982 to 86. He had done Saint Elsewhere from 82 to 88. And then he would later come back and do 5 episodes of Girl Meets World. Long career for William Daniels. Too much to go into here. And then I threw in here, even though they're not heavily featured in really any of these episodes, they're in there a little bit in the first couple. But you have Betsy Randall and William Russ as Amy and Alan Matthews, the parents, who would later come back and do 2 episodes of Girl Meets World apiece. And I just remember, like, these guys, William Russ in particular has had a significantly longer career of like that guy in things, both before and after Boy Meets World. But I just remember, like, these guys are the epitome of like the parent for this era of TV shows for me, in the same way that I'm sure like a generation, 5 years before me probably look at Fred Savage's parents from the Wonder Years as like that they're stereotypical parents in a TV show in a sitcom like this. Okay. So yeah, it was just kind of like a like seeing them, just they immediately felt like comfortable and like, oh yeah, of course those guys are the parents on this show. I spent years and years with them on my TV. They just felt super familiar. So shout out to them. Diving into kind of the episode-specific casts in Back to School 2, we have the introduction of Anthony Tyler Quinn as Mr. Turner, who is a regular from seasons 2 through 4. And then he even came back and did a few episodes for Girl Meets World after, like, he gets pretty much almost unceremoniously written off the show at the end of season 4. Specifically, like, it's another one of those like very special episodes where Sean joins a cult and like everybody tries to pull him out of it, and it's not until Mr. Turner gets in a motorcycle accident that like it finally snaps Sean out. And that's the last thing we see of Mr. Turner, is he doesn't come back in season 5. So it's like, wait, what happened?
It took him a long time to recover.
Yeah. Took him 20 years to recover, and then come back into everybody's life in Girl Meets World.
Girl Meets the new teacher. I love that that callback. I mean, I haven't watched any of Girl Meets World. I didn't want it to ruin things. Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
It's so good.
Really?
Like,
I've not watched it myself.
It is the same kind of schlocky, slapstick goofiness that you'd expect from Boy Meets World, contextualized for a modern audience, but still with enough awesome fun stuff for old school Boy Meets World fans. First couple episodes in the first season are rocky. It gets into its actual full on, like, it goes places that are a lot of fun, that are really good, that helps develop the new cast as well as balance out the older cast. Just Corey and Topanga as parents, the relationships that they have with their children, their children's friends. Corey is a teacher. He basically is the Mr. Feeney role of this film. Imagine if
it's basically another Fuller House.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, imagine if Alan Matthews and Mr. Feeney were the same character, and that's Corey Matthews. And so he plays kind of like a doofy dad, but at the same time, he's this very smart, like, teacher who has a lot of insight into his students. One of whom happens to be his daughter.
He did learn from the best.
He did
There
learn
you
from
go.
the best. Yeah, he's Mr. Feeney also has like some fun cameos before he ever shows up on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's on like a Department of Education poster in a subway at one point. Like it's just
the superintendent of the New York Board of Education now.
Yeah, like
Makes sense.
where characters go in this show, or like in Girl Meets World, is a total fulfillment of where characters were when they left, like when they ended Boy Meets World, and it's very fulfilling. So for older fans, it's very fulfilling. For younger fans, it's fun because there's a history to the show, and it's lived in, but there's still so much new stuff and fun stuff happening for the younger kids. So it's a great family show overall.
Yeah, we'll have to come back and do like a sequel episode of with looking at a couple Girl Meets World episodes.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I was on I hosted and was part of a podcast called The TV Repairman, where the Girl Meets World episode was our last episode. We would dig into different like TV shows, watch a random episode, and then like come in and fix them at the end, like what was wrong with them, like just for comedy purposes. But this was one of them, and that's actually what got me to start watching the show, and I very much deeply in love with it.
Nice.
Before we
ahead.
Move off of Mr. Turner, I do want to say that one of the best jokes that Boy Meets World tells about itself is in Graduation. The graduation, I believe, a graduation episode in season 5 when Minkus,
from high school,
when they graduate from high school, Minkus, who was a character who was really prevalent from season 1 and 2, and I think bits of 3 and 4, but he fell off. Makes a joke like, "Hey, Mr. Turner," and walks off screen, like, because neither of them had been seen in a season and a half at least.
This speaks to the set change between seasons 3 and 4. Where they're like, "Minkus, where have you been? We haven't seen you forever." He goes, "Oh, I'm just on the other side of the hallway.
I've been over there."
Over there. And they're like, "Oh, we don't go over there anymore." And he goes, "Oh, Mr. Turner," because Mr. Turner's classroom was always on the other side of that hallway. So it's not like he was ever gone. He just wasn't, part of the new hallway.
Yeah.
That's a good.
I remember those like little self-referential bits always being nice. And one of them also features the next person I wanted to highlight. Blake Soper plays Joey the Rat Epstein in this, who was on 16 episodes over the course of the run of the show. It finally concluding in that graduation episode, where basically the joke is, in this episode when he's introduced, he's 3 or 4 years older than Corey and Sean and Topanga and them, and he still graduates at the same time as the rest of them years later. So it was a little I remember that being a fun little gag at his expense. And he'd previously before this done Salute Your Shorts, which was another staple of certainly my childhood growing up. And then Ethan Suplee plays Frankie Stechino here, who did a few more episodes than his compatriot Joey the Rat Epstein. He was on 19 episodes before eventually he would go on to kind of make his name as Randy Hickey on the TV series My Name is Earl. So a couple little kind of cameo bits in that episode in particular.
Have you seen what he looks like now?
And that's maybe 6 months ago or something. Like he was making Twitter trends and stuff because he's gotten super into shape and everything. And that's
For real?
one of the reasons
Frankie's
I think he has.
Frankie's hot.
Frankie's hot now.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we also say Frankie being teased as like a 90s LGBT character?
Oh, I was going to bring that up. Don't worry. We'll talk about it.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute.
We'll get to that.
I don't know if that was a tease or like, are you saying he was like teased as in like foreshadowing that he was it was one of those things I was like, oh, this doesn't line up well.
It was
because they handle it not like as a joke. Like he says, "Well, I have to think about some things."
It's a joke, but it's
not.
It's definitely like it
not,
feels out of place a little bit.
But not to the point of
in 2020.
Yeah. In particular, one of his other kind of claims to fame over the course of the show is that he was his dad was played by WWF superstar Vader. or maybe I don't know if he was with WWF.
He was with
WCW
WWF at the time. Yeah,
But
WWF
yeah,
at the time.
Vader comes in for an episode or two as Mr. Stakino, basically. So in the next episode, I Never Sang for My Legal Guardian. It was one of the episodes that featured Blake Clark as Chet Hunter, who we talked about a little bit already.
Blake Clark is just a phenomenal
He
actor.
did 12 episodes over the course of the series. He's a regular in a lot of the Adam Sandler movies. He took over as Slinky Dog in the Toy Story series after Jim Varney's passing, and then he even came back for an episode in Girl Meets World to reprise his role as Chet. Yeah, another one of those, like, he came on the screen. I was like, oh, that's right, this guy. Just like this, watching through these 4 episodes was just a never-ending string of those kinds of moments for me. And then lastly, I included him here just because of how many episodes he had been on. But Alex, I'm guessing Dessert, because it's spelled like dessert, but with like an accent over the first E, played by Alex Dessert played Eli Williams, who, correct me, Robert, because I didn't watch other episodes around this, but was he another teacher?
Yeah, so
or was he just one of like Mr. Turner's friends?
Funny enough, it's both. He was a friend
yeah.
of Mr. Turner, that Mr. Turner gets a job at John Adams High as the communications teacher. So he teaches like I think he definitely teaches the class where they do the news show. He might also teach a radio class, or at least he gives Sean and Corey the platform to have their own radio show at one point.
Yeah,
Gotcha,
he's like this AV, like he's in charge of like the AV club and stuff like that.
He's real cool.
Cool. Yeah, he did 16 episodes of the show over the course of the run, and then he would go on to be a regular on the TV show Becker for 6-7 years from 98 to 2004. So good for him. And then he's done a ton of other stuff here and there since. And then there was Sean, is one of the first time of these 4 episodes where we got introduced to Matthew Lawrence playing Jack, Sean's half brother, right? Older half brother, basically. He was a regular from seasons 5, 6, and 7. He is most notably the brother to Joey and Andy Lawrence, all 3 of whom had done the TV series Brotherly Love prior to this. He was also Chris in Mrs. Doubtfire. And then he came back for 1 episode of Girl Meets World as well. Do you have anything to add there, Robert?
Oh, I was going to say, the Lawrence brothers were all over Disney. Like there's, was it Off the Ship or Shipwrecked or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah,
the one where the Miller brothers not their brother, because it's actually a sequel to the Dude Ranch one that the oldest and youngest brother were in.
Exactly, yeah.
And they have to deal with like their ship getting taken over by pirates.
Yes. The second or the first one was called Brother to Brother, I think.
No,
Maybe
No?
I
Is that
don't
the
remember. I remember there
because
was
they're cousins, not brothers.
Oh, shit.
There was one that came up in one of the like suggestions for one of the movies we had watched on this, one of the Disney Channel original movies that featured basically Andy Lawrence, the youngest brother, playing like himself and then a clone of himself or something like that. I don't remember which one that was, but yeah, I remember like this was definitely the era of the Lawrence brothers, kind of in Disney ABC type stuff. You have Trina McGee here playing Angela, who was another regular from seasons 5 through 7, and then also came back for 1 episode of Girl Meets World. You have probably the most notable guest star, of course, being Jennifer Love Hewitt playing Jennifer Love Pfefferman, who had done Party of 5. She'd done I Know What You Did Last Summer, which is obviously being very heavily lampooned in that episode. And this came out right around the time she was in Can't Hardly Wait. And then she has since gone on to do stuff like Ghost Whisperer, Criminal Minds, and 911, kind of recurring roles on those. And then the last one that I just want to give a little shout out to here was Richard Lee Jackson in that episode playing Kenny, had done Saved by the Bell, the new class. He was in that. That was kind of like his breakout role before this. This is like the only episode he ever did of Boy Meets World, so he's like a one-off character as well. And it just like watching that and seeing that, I was like, so much of Boy Meets World is Saved by the Bell, but with like just a different core dynamic, but it continues on to like the new class years of what, like season 6 and 7 basically are Saved by the Bell, the new class, but for Boy Meets World.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's lots of parallels between, or not the new class, just the college years, and then Girl Meets World, I guess, would be the new class effectively.
Well, it's interesting that they don't even try to introduce Kenny. He's just there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, talking about Kenny, like he's been here the whole time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he is, and then obviously the thing that shows that episode's age more than anything else is all of the South Park references.
Oh my god,
oh my god, they killed Kenny. Just like being super throughout that episode.
It was
where
so
I was like,
important that they did it twice.
Exactly, yeah. And then our last episode, Be True, features our first introduction for these 4 episodes of Maitland Ward, who played Rachel. She was a regular from seasons 6 and 7. And then Bonnie Bartlett playing Dean Bolander did 5 episodes of the show. She had also done Saint Elsewhere. And she has most recently done a pair of episodes of Better Call Saul in 2017. And there's like a little trivia note later. She and Mr. Feeney are basically married in real life and have been for 50, 60 years or something like that. The super, super happy together couple kind of thing. So yeah, diving into trivia. The lone note for trivia on the Back to the School episode is the comic that Mr. Turner takes is specifically Uncanny X-Men episode or issue number 316 in Legal Guardian. Corey's mispronouncing of puberty as puberty was not originally in the script. Ben Savage just hates saying the word puberty, and so he pronounced it differently during filming. Anthony Tyler Quinn's reaction is real.
To this day, I can't hear the word puberty without thinking puberty.
Puberty, yeah.
It's just part of me now.
Yeah. And then the title of the episode, I Never Sang for My Legal Guardian, is based off of the play and film called I Never Sang for My Father. The term is legal guardian. Legal guardian is used instead because Jonathan Turner was going to become Sean's legal guardian before his father comes back into the picture. And then there was Sean, features multiple references, as we already talked about, to South Park, both in the killing of Kenny and Eric's introduction line of "Howdy-ho." Jennifer Love Hewitt and Will Friedle were dating at the time of this episode. So that's why they go so hard and heavy on the makeout scene, I guess. And they had also recently starred in the film Trojan War together. Jennifer Love Pfefferman is played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, who co-starred with Nev Campbell in Party of Five. Both actresses led their respective slasher film franchises, Campbell in Scream and Hewitt in I Know What You Did Last Summer, which are parodied heavily in this episode. And additionally, Ryder Strong and Ben Savage had previously made guest appearances on Party of Five. They have that little joke in the episode about, the hot girl from Party of Five, and they all, like, even Jennifer Love Hewitt says, "Oh, Nev Campbell." Mr. Feeney's line, "This class will not be interested in the romantic goings-on of its students, will not be more interested in the romantic goings-on of its students than it is with whatever the hell I'm teaching," was heavily edited to remove the word hell when this episode was aired on Disney Channel. One of 2 episodes to be aired with the TV PG-V rating alongside the episode Brotherly Shove.
There's a whole fight in that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yep.
The title is... Yes. The title is, of course, a reference to Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. And then tying to what you said earlier, Robert, according to IMDb, one of the trivia notes on this episode is often considered by many fans to be the best episode in the series. And then specifically, if you go into IMDb, 41 out of 41 people found this interesting, which to me says some Boy Meets World fan forum basically like banded together, because like every other like, note is like page. 2 or 3 other people or something like that. So I just think like some chat room basically got in and was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and create an IMDb account so I can enter this bit of trivia. You guys all go in and like it. Because I just was like, okay, sure. It certainly is like the most iconic for me. I don't know if I would say it's the best, because I'm a sucker for like the graduation episodes where they basically say goodbye to Feeney and stuff.
Oh, this is fantastic.
And then finally in Be True, you have in an interview with the Television Academy Foundation in 2017, Bonnie Bartlett, aka Dean Lila Bolander, recalled telling Michael Jacobs, the co-creator of the show, that she thought this was the worst script that she had done since high school. So tying back to your
of me not knowing a fact and being so glad I chose this episode because it's not good.
Yeah, you tying back to that your comment earlier about this being an intentionally bad choice because it was a bad episode. And then one of the aspects of this episode is that Jack, played by Matthew Lawrence, is embarrassed to take Rachel, played by Maitland Ward, out on a date because of their height difference. In real life, Lawrence is 5'8", and Ward is 5'10 and a half, according to IMDb at least. Finally, a few kind of just overall Boy Meets World bits of trivia that I wanted to pull in here. We already talked about one, the episode's Promises. If you can't be with the one you love, and the truth about honesty were banned from Disney, the Disney Channel, due to their kind of adult content, but they are all visible. And I did click into each of the episodes, so they at least started playing on Disney Plus. I didn't watch them, so again, don't know if they've been edited or not, but they are all there on the app. Mr. Feeney and Dean Bolander get married in Boy Meets World, State of the Unions, which aired in 1999. In real life, William Daniels and Bonnie Bartlett have been married since 1951. So, damn, that's almost 70 years.
Very impressive.
Congratulations to them. Corey, Sean, and Topanga skip the 9th and 10th grade, which we talked about earlier. In season 1, they're in 6th grade, up through season 3, where they're in 8th grade. Then they just skip 2 years and jump into the 11th grade for season 4. And then by the end of season 7, they're basically sophomores in college. And then lastly, the character of Topanga was originally just a fringe character, a kind of hippie new age girl intended as a foil to the main characters, but she proved so popular that the producers expanded her character to become more mainstream and eventually a main player in the series and the love interest of Corey Matthews. That popped out at me before I even looked into the trivia, because I like in the cast breakdown, Danielle Fishel was in 10 fewer episodes than everybody else in the kind of core cast. And I was like, oh, that's right. Season 1, which we didn't look at here, really was kind of it again, in a parallel to like Saved by the Bell. It was the, Good Morning Miss Bliss year of Boy Meets World, where it had a different thing. And then season 2 kind of really soft rebooted like the series, introducing Mr. Turner, bringing in kind of Topanga into the core cast of people, and then kind of taking the show from there and saying this is the new norm for this show.
Exactly. That's one of my first notes, and we'll talk about it. It ties into and then there was Sean, in the way that, like, in the first season, not only do Corey and Sean not like Topanga, she is not really a main character like it says here. The closest they ever get is when they have to work on a project together, and Topanga like puts lipstick all over her face to show that she's like not afraid of other people's perception, which is awesome. But then she very much becomes a like vain 90s girl character, which really sucks.
Mm-hmm. I think that speaks a lot to her growth as a character, because she does have to reconcile that later on in the series.
She does.
That's what happens. You are so indicative of like your parents' influence when you're like a kid growing up, and then when you become a teenager, you start being way more influenced by your peers and society. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's well represented in the Topanga's character. I don't think it's odd. I think it's very atypical.
That's interesting. And then there was Sean. Sean talks about Corey and Topanga having been together since before Sean knew them, which is interesting because not only did Corey and Sean, via trivia in other episodes, meet each other when they were like 7 or 8 at a zoo, but like I said, Corey and Topanga didn't really like each other. They weren't together. They did not they didn't even kiss or like even accept each other's presence for half a season, multiple episodes. So it's like it's kind of strange to see the way that they kind of retconned Corey and Topanga into this like incredible love story, which, I mean, granted, it's great. I love Corey and Topanga together, but the way they kind of mess with their own lore to put it all together is interesting.
Yeah, there were a couple other little bits of trivia that I didn't pull in here, but that this conversation kind of sparks. One of them was kind of bouncing off of that. There are, over the course of the show, several times throughout the years, they mention how Corey and Topanga first met, but it's never the same story. It just kind of like continually getting retconned throughout the show to suit whatever needs of the show they had kind of at that time. And then there was another reference I'm trying to find, something to the effect of basically Danielle Fishel, when she hit puberty, that's when they started straying her away from being like the hippy dippy character, because as her body was changing, the writers didn't feel like it fit her character anymore. So it seemed more like they didn't know what they were getting when they cast, a prepubescent girl versus where she would grow up into, and they kind of altered her character as much around that, at least according to the trivia, as anything else. As like it was less like she was set up as a hippy dippy foil to Corey and Sean in that first season, because she was like, Minkus would basically later fill that role as like, an arch nemesis or arch rival kind of character. But they liked her well enough that they kind of like shifted her position in the gang elsewhere. But yeah, so a couple other little bits of trivia there that I didn't pull into kind of the doc, but I had seen when I was doing some of the research there. So yeah, let's dive in to how does the show hold up. This is a show that ended airing 20 years ago now, basically. Started airing 27 years ago. So how does it hold up in this day and age? Robert, as the guest, I will throw to you first.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because, I mean, I have been watching Boy Meets World steadily since I was a child for my entire life. So it's not like I've had this, like, gone back to sort of, like, perspective. So for me, I still love watching all of these episodes, and still, like, have a great time with them. Obviously, not everything holds up super well. The relationship between Joey and Frankie, and that thing we touched on earlier, when Frankie like immediately takes it back, like, are you calling me gay? And there's like, I need to go think, which is by no means like really a homophobic statement, but is very much like a well, I guess really it is when you get to the core of it.
It's still using gay as like an attack,
right?
But the character's not responding to it as an attack,
and like I mean,
which is that stands out for the time.
Yeah, it's weird because if you think about it, like 20 years ago or 24 years ago, that was super progressive.
Exactly.
In comparison,
and that's kind of where I was going with that. Like, it's not specifically homophobic because they were trying,
Yeah, and one of the other another trivia point that came up is the later episode the later relationship that we get between Sean and Angela as like an interracial relationship was something that was like pretty much unheard of in that era of television, and so it like the show was a progressive show in various elements like that over the course of its run.
Trevor, you and I have talked. Yeah, you and I have talked about how it's really crazy to think how much progress has been made. Social justice progress has been made just in the last, 12, 15 years that you and I have been cognizant adults.
Mm-hmm.
And they take that in stride as well as it's like, 20 years ago, if you think about it, 25 years ago, interracial relationships on television were like a no-go. Like, that's so odd and weird and strange today. But Boy Meets World was kind of knocking down those barriers.
Yeah,
every Friday,
like, especially like because you can go back to like I Love Lucy and you have an interracial relationship. Sure, they sleep in different beds and stuff, but it was there. But it specifically the trivia note on the IMDb page highlighted how it was an interracial relationship among youth in a show directed at children,
right,
more or less, or directed at families. It was, hey. Like it's appropriate for us to show that this is an okay thing, but it was still like that had not been done regularly throughout that, and it is so. Back before That Nerdy Site, Logan and I had done a show for a year and a half, or season and a half of a West Wing watch-along show, which West Wing started airing in 1999, I believe. So even after these episodes, basically. And they had a dedicated episode in their first or second season to kind of the Matthew Shepard kind of storyline, which was one of those, like, that was one of the first instances, because that was coming out around the same time that Will and Grace came out. And those things were really putting kind of gay characters into the mainstream, into the forefront in a way that, we hadn't seen before. And certainly with something like Will and Grace, the gay lifestyle got normalized and became like a regular, like people started to understand it. But this is still also the era where like Ellen basically got blacklisted when she came out as gay on her show for years. And so
all of this...
it is a different, it's still a different time. And so to see them kind of like flirt with some of these ideas and issues was certainly interesting.
Well, and all of that kind of points out the irony of Disney not wanting to air certain episodes based on their content, when Boy Meets World was trying to say like, hey, we need to talk about this to the audience that we're aiming this at. And then Disney comes in and says, we're not going to do that, and we're going to take all of those instances out of the show. So it's interesting to see the way that it can be treated post creation, even if they were trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, and I think that does speak to one of the points Cameron brought up earlier, though, of like the show being targeted originally as a TGIF show is a more family, all ages kind of thing, versus a Disney Channel show is more of a like geared towards a younger audience. So it makes sense that, hey, yeah, you might want to tweak some of those things, because you don't need to necessarily be teaching 10-year-olds about parent abuse or something like that. Right. It's certainly something they should learn, but maybe not from Boy Meets World or something like that.
Boy Meets World shouldn't be telling children after school, hey, premarital sex is not only a thing, but it's like, oh, kind of complicated. Like that's a fine for like a TGIF Friday night aimed at teens, tweens, and in-betweens. But like full on, like that is not like that. Like you have that small age gap where the things you talk about are very different, and the manner that you speak of them. So it does make sense that you do treat that differently in that retrospect.
It's interesting on a show that like, post season 1, I mean, starting in season 2 is one of their characters is explicitly like a very horny teenage boy who is constantly, constantly has a new girl, constantly has a new girlfriend. And granted, they talk about that and they bring it up and they kind of chastise.
But it's implied, right? That's the whole thing. Is there's the difference between the implication and the actual outright stating.
But the point I was going to get to is that they make out so like outwardly on that show that I feel like they are bringing up that kind of like physical relationship between people in high school in maybe half of the episodes when they're in high school, and then maybe more when they're in college. They're bringing up this physical relationship that all teens have, and they talk about that a lot. But they don't ever really talk about sex, except for when they bring up the fact that none of them have had sex.
Yeah, that's I enjoyed the joke and then Rashawn, where it's like they always come with the virgins first, and like Corey thanks Topanga for basically saving his life in that moment, and Jack and Eric are like, well, we're dead, and Sean is like, well, I'm as close to dead as you can get, or I'm as sick as you can get without being dead.
Right.
It's like that is
which is probably the most like explicit.
Yeah, I would say that is like the most PG-13 joke that they tell probably over the course of the show.
That's a great joke, though. Like that's such a great joke.
Yeah. So yeah, I really, for me, watching these episodes, there were really only like 2 moments where I was like, oh, that doesn't hold up well. And one of them was the like using gay as an attack kind of thing, and then the like over reliance on South Park references in
very
that
1999.
Episode. Like, yeah. Other than those 2 things, I was like, I could see these being tropes of a sitcom made today. Like nothing else really seemed that like far out of place. And yeah, I mean, like good performances all around, good kind of like energy, and just like they know what kind of show they're on.
I will say one thing that kind of stands out to me that would be, I think, less done today. I think maybe the framework and the story could still exist, but they would be done in a much more sensitive way, is the character of Harley Kiner. And the way that whole episode is handled, and the way that like Corey is, fearing for his life, specifically like says multiple times, like, I'm going to kill you. Like, he's going to kill me. Like, going and talking to Eric, and like Eric sticking up for him is a great like character turn for Eric. But the way that like the bully is so like outwardly specifically antagonistic, I feel like they would maybe do in a less like violent manner. They're gonna say, or maybe it would be done in a more sensitive way, because I feel like bullying is one of those things that we've gotten more able to talk about in a better manner.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair. I guess one of the reasons that didn't jump out at me is because I've also been watching a ton of My Hero Academia over the last couple of years, and Bakugo is just always screaming about how he's going to murder people on that show in a similar way, but clearly not like I'm actually going to kill you kind of thing. So like I see Bakugo as a much angrier character than like I would say. If I was to take that storyline and put it into this day and age, there would be like a moment where you realize at the end that it's really Harley is just kind of overcompensating for his own insecurities.
Right, they would
like
explain it a lot
like
more
you
than
would
just have this
you
evil
would,
20...
You would get a, yeah.
Like, because that was the other thing is like when they talk about Jonathan, when they first mention Jonathan, he's like, I know that's Harley Kiner. And Sean's like, that guy looks like he's a 30-year-old man. And then Harley Kiner shows up and he looks like he's a 29-year-old man. Like, it's that whole kind of dichotomy is really strange to me, the way that like Jonathan there's no way that he could be a student because he's, a fully grown man. But Harley Kiner, who is a fully grown man, is just hanging out, gonna murder some children.
Yeah. Another little bit of trivia. The guy who plays Jonathan Turner originally auditioned for Corey's father.
Wow.
Yeah, that was something. So him getting brought back in as like the teacher in season 2.
I could see that happening. I could see that working.
In another episode, they do replace Harley Kiner entirely with a different actor.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. There were that's another little bit of trivia that was in there. There was like multiple characters are played by like multiple actors over the course of the show. Or like, and I talked about it earlier. Like Mickey Dolenz plays 2 different characters. Like he played one character in like the band, and then like when he came back for the second episode, he played like the other character in the band. He just like swapped characters basically. So yeah, there were a ton of those kinds of things over the course of the show, where it's just like, yep, they're bringing new people here and there. They were not, and like I said, Topanga's dad is played by 3 different actors over the run of the show, including Michael McKean, tying back to Better Call Saul earlier. So yeah, just
listen, the writers had a prerogative and a story they wanted to tell. And
they didn't care if they couldn't get the actor back for it.
An actor's schedule be damned, the character stays the same.
Hideo Kojima makes the shows that he makes, and it's just unassailable, really.
Yes. So yeah, those are really the only couple moments that jumped out at me, and I can appreciate, kind of the bullying subplot of that first episode would probably also have a different resolution and maybe less harsh language. Anything from you, Cam, that kind of jumped out as like, oh, this does not hold up?
I mean, it's the same thing you run into whenever you watch 90s television, is that like people don't talk to each other the way that they did on television back then. That's just not how people talk to each other. Granted, like, but outside of that, it's like, outside of that, that's it. Like, it's kind of the outlandishness of, teen, tween, children's television where, but then again, I think about it and it's like, no, my older brother did make a contract that he would make a sign that basically said he was the coolest person in the universe.
So yeah,
like, that was real. That happened in my actual life. Now, and the thing is, it's like it plays with the idea of like the kind of the quote unquote fantasy of being a kid with the reality of being a kid. And Boy Meets World has always lended and tended to be on the side more of the fantasy aspect of childhood and youth, which is great, which is why I think it holds up as a really great show. But it's so cool. Like I love this show. This is especially season 2. Season 2, I would say season 2 to 4 are to me premier prime. Like, this is the good stuff of Boy Meets World. I love, especially, and I'll even go out on a further limb, seasons 2 and 3 where it's like they're in junior high, to me is the best version of Boy Meets World. Because you have that, they play on that line of this could happen to, this would never happen in a million years so well.
Yeah.
Like they cross that, like they play with that line so well. And I think that they get in season 5 and 6, they get really into the well, let's be more real. Like, it's far more on the reality, and then season 7's just so bonkers nuts as far as the storyline goes. It's like they had nowhere to take these characters because they can't actually tell actual college experiences.
Yeah,
like you can't tell it on the show, so you get like the weird like dilemma where Corey is being hassled for wearing a wedding ring.
Yep, you're married, you're dead.
Like, yeah. That episode is super weird and doesn't make a lot of sense. Granted, it has one of my favorite moments in the entire show.
Is that when they're at Hooters?
No, it's where their girls are in the shower. That's a terrible way to start this off. But the girls are alone and talking to each other. Angela is talking with Topanga, and one of the other girls who they know says like, "Oh no, I work there. Like, yeah, it's a fine place to work. Yada yada." And Angela makes a comment about like how awful it is, like you're being like misogynized, and then gets into the shower, and the other girl goes, "I probably should have told her that I'm a cook." Anyway, I really like that moment. It's a fun misdirect because this is a very beautiful young college age girl, and so she says like, "Yeah, I work there," like yada yada yada. It's like, oh, but she says like, "Oh, I work in the kitchen," so like that's the way Angela has like a power move moment where she like walks off, right, and then it's like immediately deflated by it being like, I'm not one of those people being
yeah, because the episode is very much with the
this is an episode we're not even talking about. Sorry guys,
no, you're fine. It very much like has the air of like Hooters is kind of crass and something that's not really okay. Like I very much remember being a kid and watching that episode and being like, oh, they're going to, it's called clivage. And Corey makes reference to them, to the servers there, revealing their most private parts were the words he used.
It's a weird thing for a married man who's definitely had sex to say.
No, he's engaged at that point. He's not married.
Oh, they're engaged at that point?
Yeah.
I thought they were married at that point. Oh, that's
maybe they are, but
No, they are married because it's the wedding ring that he's wearing, not an engagement ring.
Oh, you're right. Okay, my apologies. But even still, even more insane that they're that embarrassed about everything going there. Yeah. And I very much remember that as a kid cementing like, oh, that's not like something that's okay to go do, is like be at any establishment that might even hint at the fact that women have bodies.
Yeah, like the combo of that and Big Daddy and just crapping on Hooters for the entirety of that film. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, it was a different time.
To be fair, it saved a lot of young men from getting mediocre wings. So I mean, I'm on board.
Fair enough.
This is the series that like ends with Eric Matthews turning into a hermit called Plays with Squirrels.
Oh
so
my
yeah,
God.
They definitely didn't know where to take some of these characters.
That was in a fake future.
That future doesn't have to exist.
Yeah, that feature doesn't have to exist, but it could.
But Plays with Squirrels is my favorite single character on the show.
Eric Matthews by far is the greatest single character actor, like single character on that entire show.
Oh, he's incredible.
Because he goes from being like, and it's cool because if you look at it from the lens of Corey thinking his older brother's the coolest person in the world to realizing his older brother's this massive, enormous like goofball to society.
Like the episode where they go on their honeymoon and Eric follows them down there to make sure that they have the best honeymoon possible. And he gets like a heat stroke or some kind of fever in the sun that he thinks a tarantula is a bird, and then it bites him, and it's Eric Matthews. I could do a whole podcast on Eric Matthews.
You could do an entire podcast series on Eric Matthews.
I think we should.
Yeah, he's a fun character, and certainly like Wilfred L. definitely got to do a lot of fun stuff with him. Yeah, I think that to one of the things you kind of mentioned, Cameron, that jumped out at me is like hopping into the first episode, Back to School, and seeing like how mature Corey's trying to be as this 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid or whatever, and like he's acting like he's 18 or whatever. It was like, oh yeah, that is a little off-putting to get used to. But then as I'm talking to you, Cameron, I'm like, I could see Cameron doing that exact same thing at the age of 12 and talking exactly like that. So it's like there is like a reality to the, you're going to a new school, you're going to try and make a first impression, you're going to try and make that first impression much more different than who you actually are. I can totally appreciate that. And I know people who did that or would do that. So
and this is
so
also
like I got used to it pretty quickly.
this is also before Sean is like the ultimate cool kid and is still in that zany, like, I'm a kid, like, we're gonna make fun jokes and do like the most amazingly synchronized secret handshakes in the entire fucking world.
Yeah. And I'm gonna put sideburns on the side of my head.
So good, just so good. And then Topanga's the one that rips him off.
Yeah. So let's dive into some favorite moments from these episodes. We can kind of tackle all the episodes together, or just kind of go by episode. Doesn't matter to me. Robert, hit me with some of your favorites.
Well, I mean, Chicken a la Tang is a real standout. That's incredible. I'm a cook by trade, so I don't know that. It hurts me to hear things like that, but it's beautiful.
It's that like bachelor lifestyle. As a 35-year-old single guy living alone, that's absolutely something I would make if I was more into cooking.
All right. Leave that where that is. And then I think another one that, before I pass it off to y'all, is just Mr. Feeney in general. Goddamn, I love Mr. Feeney. He is everything that I've ever wanted from a teacher. And the way that they make him funny in later seasons, because he's always funny, but he's not trying to be. But later he like really softens, and they write him as being a lot more of a comedic character. And the way that I am blanking on his name. It's in this document I'm looking at. Michael Daniels? William Daniels, sorry. The way that William Daniels plays him is just absolutely extraordinary. The man is a treasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his relationship with Eric in particular over the course of this show, we get a little bit of that in Legal Guardian, right?
Yes,
that's where he basically says like, Eric, go tutor this kid.
It's one of the first times you really see him like take care of Eric and like believe in him, and not just like write him off as Eric the stupid pretty boy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, their relationship over the run of the show, I think, is one of my favorites. Certainly, obviously, like he holds a special place in kind of all the core cast's heart, but I think he and Wilfred L. just made magic when they were together on screen a lot of the time. So
I mean, I can't believe we got through almost an entire Boy Meets World podcast without bringing up the Feeney call. Feeney! Yeah, it's a real big deal.
What is that rust bucket monstrosity doing it out in front of my driveway?
Oh, my car. That's great.
Oh, you want me to move it, don't you? Yes. Just perfect.
I'm
just
amazed it runs.
The perfect combination of like antagonistic and mentoring that I have now just realized I have constantly sought out in every single mentor I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I just had that realization just now. I've had a couple Feenies in my life.
It's epiphany time.
Even in Be True, when like the episode is ending or whatever, and they're like, Did you do this, George? Why would you do all this? Why would you destroy all this stuff? He's like, and he just like he like resigns himself to going along with it as like, yes, I'm doing it as a, in the heat of passion or whatever. Like his delivery of that in an otherwise crappy episode still is like beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah. Mr. Feeney, great. One of the all-time great characters. I love that was another one that something that came up a couple years ago was like him giving like a speech or something on Twitter. Like I don't remember what it was, but I remember him like popping up and just like hearing from him again was just like, oh, that's endearing. So shout out to him for just continuing to be. I think he just like celebrated like his 90th birthday or something recently.
Yeah, he's always my favorite part of Blades of Glory. Nice.
He's out there. A lot of the kind of core Boy Meets World cast are still like friends and still like, I think they did a Zoom call together or something in this quarantine state we're all in recently. So that was nice to see.
Good to see they can get together during the apocalypse.
Yeah. How about you, Cam? Any favorite moments you want to highlight?
Favorite moments definitely are going to be anything with Eric Matthews and Mr. Feeney together. Like you said, it's magic on screen. Outside, just honestly, I never sang for my legal guardian. Corey transitioning to home shower and
real estate.
and put his fingers in real estate. Wonderful. The moment where he says, Corey, are you busy? He goes, well, I have to show a lovely 2-bedroom apartment to a 3-bedroom apartment to a wonderful couple at 7:30, but after that I'm free. It's like, and he's like, listen, I think we should go with shag.
Yeah, he's got the swatches.
Because it feels good between your toes. And it's just like, oh my gosh. Like, oh, Ben Savage just owning it. Like when the characters are when the Matthews brothers are able to kind of be these very loosely kind of fun characters.
Oh, certainly.
And it's awesome. But then you also get the moment in that same episode where Corey goes out on a big limb with Topanga to go out to that biker bar in that truck stop to get Chet and say, Chet, like, listen, Mr. Turner's great, but at the end of the day, Sean only has one father. And it's very clear from his interaction with Corey, even though he never calls Corey by his name, that it's deep. Like, it's very clear Chet doesn't want to come home a failure at failing to bring home his wife.
Yeah, I think Chet is...
And he has a deep sense of shame at being a failure, and Mr. Turner being this guardian figure to Sean has kind of helped turn Sean's academic career around. Because he makes mention, he goes, I get all of Sean's report cards and all of his papers, so he sees the progress Sean is making as a student. And so he thinks, okay, I have failed as a husband, I failed as a father. The best thing I can do is like let Mr. Turner be his guardian. And for that emotional point in that episode where it's like Chet realizing, no, I really do have to be here for my son. Like, because emotionally, Sean is not doing well.
Well, and I think that goes back to something you said earlier about people not talking this way in real life. I think Chet Hunter is one of the most normal human characters on the whole show, in that he is like in a deeply sad situation and he is depressed and he is not able to get himself out of it. And he leaves because, like you said, he is ashamed. He knows that he's not done right by Sean, and that's part of why he's not able to come back, because he's scared that he's going to do poorly again. But this whole...
And you learn later on how many, like, Sean's his youngest son. He has other kids.
Right.
Like, that he's failed utterly and completely. So, like, he has a bad track record of being a dad to begin with.
Right, and they go through that a lot before, spoiler alert, he passes away later down the line, of him and Sean and Jack all having this really strained relationship because none of them were where they wanted to be, except for, I guess, Jack. And none of them were able to, be together for various reasons of pride and shame and all that. So I think Chet becomes one of the more interesting characters when you start to look at who he is and why he makes his decisions.
And I will say the Scream episode is what has one of my favorite, the entire concept of it being a nightmare of Sean, because Sean is trying to internalize the death of the only successful relationship he's ever known. For him to oh, Sean was the killer. Oh, it's all in his head, etc. But it's a great moment, especially there's a line about shoving an umbrella down somebody's neck and then opening it, which has stuck with me for my entire life ever since I saw this episode on TGIF. Like, the idea of murdering somebody by shoving an umbrella down their throat and then opening it. Incredibly impossible. Like, it just wouldn't work. You'd kill somebody if you shoved it down their throat to begin with. But for it to also have a level of it being then opened it.
Yeah. That's a like a Wile E. Coyote kind of like cartoon scene that you would see on Looney Tunes or something like that. You would see the umbrella go down and then you'd see it open and just the silhouette of the character turns into like an umbrella.
Yep.
Yeah. That episode in particular, I love how it's taking those tropes and just having fun with them while also telling like a deep personal story to the characters that resonates with Sean in particular. But then, we end up seeing how, like, we basically end up seeing Corey and Topanga come and say, like, be the parents, the divorcee parents to their child, saying like, we still love you, this isn't your fault, we just can't be together right now, kind of thing. This isn't on you, Sean, and you are still our friend, we will still be there for you. Don't like take this, you're taking this harder than we are, please don't.
Right.
It's a very nice emotional moment, especially given that like Sean is so often kind of the more aloof kind of character. So getting to see him in these moments where he is the most emotional of the gang is a nice kind of like that. That's that thing that like, when a dad cries in a thing, that always gets me, or something like that. Seeing Sean get emotional about that is one of those like, yep, that seeing really any like manly man character show their emotions and not like, even if they're afraid of them, is certainly one of the nice kind of flavors that we got from these episodes. I'm trying, like, one of my other favorites of just the show in general is Topanga. Danielle Fishel as Topanga.
She's so good.
Absolutely was one of like my
great.
early childhood crush kind of characters, and the relationship that she has with Corey over the years. I remember like that was my Sam and Diane kind of thing growing up, of like,
Yes.
the will they won't they was Corey and Topanga, and then turned into like Jim and Pam.
Oh yeah, 1000%.
Yeah.
Like when he flies down to Disney World to win her back, after they break up, one of the times that they break up, and she's like,
Yeah, I think that was in the very next episode after, and then there was Sean, I think.
Yeah,
when I was looking through stuff.
oh, perfect, yeah,
Because yeah,
that's also
and
when
that
they
was
brought they were doing a big relaunch of Disney World, and so they brought every single show down to Disney World.
Yeah, it was one of those like big crossover event kind of things. Like, hey, let's do cross promotion of everything. Everybody's going to be at Disney World.
yeah.
I will say it's not my favorite time they break up. My favorite time they break up and Corey wins her back is when she's looking at I think it's Van Gogh, the Starry Night painting, and she had previously been on a date with this snobby artist, like proto hipster, who is just like, yeah, and he gives her this explanation of how he kind of sees it, and it's like, it's emotional and wonderful, and then she shows it to Corey, and Corey goes, aliens. And it's like, yeah, it's true, like, Topanga is like more like artistically connected to the world, and it kind of shows off their balance as a couple. And then Corey brings it back by saying like, no, like listen, this matters to me because it matters to you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it, and that's fine. But like, you and I belong together, not because of this painting, but because we are together and we want to make this work. Love that.
Yeah, the iconic moment for me is it might have been what led to this. I don't remember where it fell in the timeline of everything, but was like the ski lodge where Corey kisses the other girl or something, and
she kisses him.
She kisses him, yeah.
Kisses
but
him.
he doesn't
Kisses
stop.
him.
And that, like,
He's
I
a
remember
fucking
that
uncle.
just
He
breaking
doesn't
my
reciprocate.
heart.
She kisses him. She stops because she realizes he's not reciprocating.
But
He
they
couldn't
stayed
get
up.
away because he has a broken leg.
They stayed up together all night talking. How is that not?
That's
a
worse.
thing?
like,
That's the
it was-
worst part.
It was emotional cheating more than anything. But yeah,
100%.
that crushed me as a kid, being like, no, why are you doing this, Corey? Stop self-sabotaging. No, how could you hurt Topanga like that? That like I remember being just devastated by that growing up.
Yes, 100%. Same.
Yeah.
Like, how is love real if the two of them aren't together?
Yeah, and then I
We're all
do
Sean Hunter.
I very much love like the kind of twist on the societal norms later of Topanga proposing to Corey at graduation before Corey can like propose to her. It was like, oh, that's a like good for girl power kind of thing. That was one of those, like, I remember like that being my reaction at the time kind of thing.
Well, to be fair, she later becomes like a very successful lawyer, and she's the breadwinner of the home.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
She is-
surprise.
Obviously, the smart one in that relationship.
Exactly.
She wears the pants in that relationship for sure.
Yeah. Any other celebratory highlights that we want to touch on?
Just real quickly, I do want to touch on one thing. The song that gets sung during "And Then There Was Sean" by The Killer. Here's a knife and here's a gun. They'll be fun for everyone. Death is on the menu tonight. I like those words will be stuck in my head for the rest of time because I just love it so much. And every few months when I'm cooking something, it'll pop into my head when I pick up a knife.
Nice. That reminded me watching these 4 episodes specifically and seeing like the evolution of the Boy Meets World theme, or just the Boy Meets World introduction. Like the first episode, there's almost like nothing in terms of like a theme introduction kind of thing. It just, you're pretty much like right in the show. To like the one we get in like seasons 5 and 6 for these episodes.
Boy Meets World.
Exactly. Like that is what I remember. That is the iconic like.
Yeah.
That's the Boy Meets World theme for me. So not hearing that in the first couple episodes we tackled, I was like, oh, it's weird.
Well,
that's a much later introduction. Prior to that, it's the weird jazzy da 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 da.
And then there's the one with the drum that starts off with a drum roll, and it's like, and it's Corey running down the stairs, and they all like hop in a car, like a convertible that's never seen. It's a very strange intro.
Yeah. Oh, the 90s. Anything else you want to celebrate, Cam?
Yes.
Okay.
Angela is a complicated, incredible character who I think we all have feelings about her because she broke Sean's heart.
A lot.
But it was important because it was Sean's, like, that was the relationship Sean needed to grow as a person.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's important to note that Angela was her own character. Not only was she a woman of color, but she had an incredibly complicated relationship with her parents that deeply impacted her relationship with Sean. And both Sean and her coming from these broken homes, these transient homes, her being a military brat, and Sean being a trailer park kid. Really, it's important, like, things work out between Topanga and Corey, so you think, well, things will work out for their friends as well, and it doesn't. And that just happens. That's part of life. And when Sean understands that things with Angela are over, and they actually do cement their breakup, like, it's an important point and important things that are done in that way that are done in a much more, I would say, realistic relationship than you get. Everybody has the high school sweethearts that they know about.
Right.
But everybody else has their Angela. The relationship that defined the moment they went from the idealism of romance to the reality of real people with real problems that we're all just trying to figure things out together or apart. And it's our decision to do it together or apart. And I think it's the relationship between, and I think Angela gets a lot of hate from the Boy Meets World fandom. There's a lot of names that get, thrown around at her, but I love the idea that Sean goes from being a very superficial character to having incredible depths to his character develop because of Angela.
Yeah.
And I feel like we all have somebody in our lives, somebody that we've had a relationship, whether it's romantic or otherwise, that is very much reflective of that. And so I wanted to give just a shout out to Angela.
Well, and it's good. It's important because this is the episode, and then there was Sean, that really cements her as being part of the crew, as being part of like the main, like cast of characters. Whereas like
she's Topanga's best friend.
Exactly. I don't know. This isn't the first episode where she's introduced or anything like that, but it is the first episode where you think, okay, Angela and everybody else are kind of on equal footing in this episode. She is screaming. She's calling attention to herself. She is cementing herself like, no, I am going to be here, and I'm going to be a important part of this story from here on out.
Yeah. I did love the little runner of like her getting all of the scream moments, and then when Jennifer Love Pfefferman comes in and tries to scream, she's like, excuse me, this is my thing.
I do the screaming around here, please.
Yeah. That was a great little, tongue-in-cheek reference and bit and everything like that. And shout out to that actress because she had a great scream for that. So, because that is, as somebody who has had to scream in a play where I was bitten by a zombie, like I did it and I made it blood curdling, but it was not easy.
It's really hard.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Do you have any other moments you want to shout out and celebrate, Robert?
I mean, I could talk forever about these 4 episodes and the whole show, so I think I've left it where it needs to be.
Yeah. I really enjoyed just kind of hopping back into this, and it was like one episode ended and then started like the next episode started autoplaying, and I was like I just kind of was letting it go, and I was like, wait, no, I need to like sit down and watch these 4 episodes so I can get ready for the show, and not just like. But it is like, it's now, hey, when I'm looking for a thing to binge, yeah, I'll probably throw Boy Meets World on, or maybe I'll try out Girl Meets World and kind of see where those characters have ended up. Because from what I've heard, like Girl Meets World, very much like when that came out, it was like it felt like a response to like Fuller House being announced or something like that. It was, hey, we're gonna take these staple shows of your youth from the 90s and we're gonna like bring them back for a new generation, but keep like the same characters that you knew and loved from that first show, and we're just going to show you what they're like as adults now and have their kids go through these same problems. And I remember seeing that and like seeing all that news and being like, oh, that's really cool. I don't really have Disney though, and I don't know if I'm in a place where I'm interested in like sitting down and watching that. But I've heard like good things about it, and I just haven't sat down and watched Girl Meets World myself. But the kind of stamp of approval that you gave it earlier, Cam, has me significantly more inclined to sit down and throw that on sometime.
Same.
Yeah,
it is very good. The relationship between Corey's daughter and her friend Maya is phenomenal, and is very different from Sean's relationship with Corey, but you can see the very deep inspirational notes from it. So overall, very good. I highly suggest anybody who ever enjoyed Boy Meets World, give Girl Meets World a shot. Give it a couple of episodes. It takes a little bit longer for it to kind of, come into its own, but it is certainly worth it.
Yeah, we're like a week or two removed from the Saved by the Bell new trailer that has come out with and that one looks to me like they're really just going to probably recreate the same formula, but now like the original cast are going to be somewhere there, like it looks like Slater's like the wrestling coach or something at Bayside now, so it'll be like, okay, well, that'll be interesting to see that. So there's just another tie-in to kind of all these shows getting this treatment.
You need them.
Yeah. So let's dive in and go ahead and hit the show with a report card. Robert, where would you grade this Boy Meets World from A+ to F?
The show as a whole, and remember, I'm very biased. I'm gonna give it an A-.
A-? All right. Sounds good. Cameron, how about you?
Here's the thing. I would also give it an A-. I think that the peaks of the show are pretty consistent and they're super high, but the valleys are so deep in like the lack of quality. Like there's always like, even in the worst episodes, there's a moment or two that make like, okay, this is why this entire episode shouldn't just be taken off of Disney Plus, because there's a really cool character moment in the last episode that we watched.
Be True.
Be True has an awesome moment with Feeney just being like, you know what, I am just going to be like, this is an act of love. Like, screw it. Like, I'm not like, I'm tied into this anyway, I'll do it. And his delivery of all of that is just so phenomenal, despite the rest of the episode just being absolute trashy garbage.
Yeah,
exactly.
So besides a subplot just being like, she's too tall for you, like every possible old person actor getting brought in to do that line too.
Right.
Just so dumb.
The post-credit scene of the old woman robbing their apartment, and then her just saying, she's too tall for you, and then letting her go is a choice, to say the least.
Yeah.
That's anyway. There's a lot I could say about the romance between those two characters.
So A- from you, Cam.
A- from me. Overall, the peaks make it worth watching, but watch out for those valleys because it's more like an enormous pothole. Yeah.
For me, I'll probably jump in with you guys on the A- front. For these 4 episodes in particular, kind of thing. Like if it would be probably a different ranking if I sat down and like rewatch the whole series, where you are gonna have maybe more of those lows, but maybe some more of those highs and stuff. I don't know where it would net out, but for these 4 episodes in particular, I was like, this was a nice jaunt through like memory lane for me. It hit nice notes of nostalgia. I remembered all these episodes. I didn't remember, necessarily how they all played out or whatever, but like they all were familiar to me, and so hopping back into them and kind of enjoying them for what they were, as a a nice little thing to do on a Saturday, Sunday, just kind of afternoon, was a nice little visit to the Boy Meets World crew. So thank you, Robert, for bringing it to us.
I could not be happier.
Yeah. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this show. The ones from Disney Plus in particular are, of course, Girl Meets World was the number one choice there. Andy Mack is on there. The most recent High School Musical, the series, is out there as well, which I certainly highly recommend.
I recommend Andy Mack as well. That's an excellent show.
I've not seen Andy Mack.
I just
there were a few
Googled
of these where I was like, I don't know any of these, but they definitely look like absolutely they would tie into this. That's So Raven, that classic show, Raven Simone. Jonas, which I got from the thumbnail, is the Jonas Brothers. And because I always forget that like they had a TV show before they were, or like as they were a band or whatever. Like
it was one of
it's one of those things. I'm like, oh, that's right. They were Disney.
First season's all right. Second season, no good.
Okay.
It was a real Kevin season.
There you go. Good Luck Charlie and Jesse were two that I was like, I don't know anything about either of these. I feel like one of them. So years ago when I was not when I was buying my most recent car, but when I bought my first car, it was a 2012 Hyundai Elantra. So when I bought it in 2012, I remember sitting in the dealership's like lobby, and they had the TVs set to Disney. And I remember like whatever I was watching on the Disney Channel during that, or maybe it was like when I would take it into the shop or something like that. But whatever I was watching, I was like, oh my God, Disney writing is terrible these days. And it was probably one of these kinds of shows. Cause it felt so over the top formulaic. And I was just like, I hate all of this, but somebody got paid to write this. So good for whoever that is. And it, like when I saw the thumbnails for like Good Luck Charlie or Jesse, I was like, it looked like it was probably one of those shows. And then lastly, The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, which I at least had fonder memories of. That was one that certainly came mostly after my time, but I remember seeing a couple episodes here and there on the Disney Channel growing up. And then lastly, as we talked about earlier in the episode, I'm going to throw in the We Have Cool Friends episode from Kinda Funny with Will Friedle, because that's a great, hour and a half, 2 hour conversation with Greg and Will. And I think Tim's on that too.
Tim's on that one as well, yeah.
Yeah, just talking about Will's career. He goes into a lot of stuff of like the struggles he had of, being on camera, and kind of his anxiety that he felt and he dealt with, and that's why he kind of stepped away for years and really was only doing voiceover stuff, was because he just couldn't get out there in front of a crew or in front of like even a studio audience or something like that. He was just getting too anxious and had to walk away from it. And so he dives into some really cool stories in there, some of which we've already kind of like referenced on this episode as well. So yeah, check that out. It'll be in the comments. The link will be in the comments below. Any extracurriculars? So what else is everybody watching on Disney Plus? Robert, I will throw it to you first, as like I seem to go over this with Cam every week. But so what other things on Disney Plus are you watching these days?
I think mostly I use Disney Plus to watch Marvel movies and Star Wars movies, which I do on a very regular basis. So I think the last thing I watched on there was Thor Ragnarok.
Nice.
Which obviously is a phenomenal film. And if you haven't seen it, what the hell are you doing here? Go watch Thor Ragnarok. Yeah,
I look forward to when we got to get into kind of starting to do some Marvel movies as part of that D Plus show. I did a solo episode on the Inhumans, and I was like, well,
oh Lord,
I
Good
bit
heavens.
the bullet for that one because I was like, nobody's going to want to talk about this. So
No.
But it was something I was curious about, and then I went and watched the rest of the season. It was fine. It's very apparent why it was only one season, but yeah, I was like, whatever. But yeah, I look forward to sitting down with people and talking. Like I think I watched like Iron Man, the first Iron Man here a week or so back,
so
just because
good.
I was like, yeah, I'm gonna throw that on, and it is like there are weird things like that that are on there. It's like, yeah, this is a weird thing to be seeing on like a Disney thing.
Super strange.
Yeah, but more power to them for it. If they're gonna own all of media, fine. At least I get to enjoy it for $9.99 a month or whatever.
If you had told me,
I will say they are going to be bringing The Princess Bride
Yep.
yes.
to Disney Plus, which as I tweeted out the other night, I think it might have been last night. Princess Buttercup, I'm just going to definitively say this here at the end of the Boy Meets World episode. Princess Buttercup is the best Disney princess. There is no debate. It's done.
Yep.
She's the best because she's from the best film of all time.
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty much my go-to answer when people ask me what my favorite movie is. It's easy to say Princess Bride.
It's a solid choice, and that's one I put out the call for because I'm like, well, that's definitely going to be a Disney Plus or a D Plus show episode
Yep.
When that comes out. So looking forward to that one. In addition to Iron Man, I'm continuing to watch the latest season of Clone Wars. It's coming out. That's been a nice, real fun arc with Ahsoka and Darth Maul and stuff. So everybody check that out if you're a fan of the Clone Wars series. How about you, Cam? You watch anything else?
Yeah, I actually have been watching. I've been watching a bit more of DuckTales, the new animated series of it. That's been really good so far. I haven't actually been watching a lot of Disney Plus lately, but yeah, that's basically it for me right now.
Nice. There's another behind the scenes series. It's like they're doing a behind the scenes of like The Mandalorian that's coming out here I believe in May as well. That's another one I'm looking forward to because I'm just like because it looks like it's a mix of like on set behind the scenes footage as well as like roundtable discussions with the directors or the actors and stuff like that. So
Those are my favorite things.
I'm gonna absolutely gobble that up when it comes to Disney Plus. So keep an eye out for that as well. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you to my guests for joining me to discuss Boy Meets World. These 4 episodes were a ton of fun, and this is definitely a series that I would be happy to sit down if you want to, somewhere down the line, Robert, or if we have another guest that wants to come in and pick 4 other episodes to sit down and discuss. We can certainly have some more fun talking about some Boy Meets World. Might not have as much trivia next time around.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, it was fun to sit down and dig up some of that stuff. Like one of my favorite parts of doing the show oftentimes is like digging into the trivia and seeing those little things and seeing like, oh yeah, Mickey Dolenz was in this. Oh, that's right. And it takes me back to all that stuff and remembering so many of those little notes. So this was another one of those fun episodes where I just enjoyed digging down the Easter egg rabbit hole kind of thing. So you can follow my guest. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's, 2 T's. Anything you want to shout out, Cameron?
May 5th, there will be a review out from me for a game that's currently under embargo.
There you go, May 5th. Yep. And you can follow Robert at Ravelord Naito, which will be in the comments below. Or you said sesh_0 for session 0. Anything you want to shout out and plug, Robert?
No, just come listen to Session 0 if you like D&D, or even if you don't, especially if you don't, because it's tangentially about D&D. And yeah, follow us on Twitter. Come check us out.
Very cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I should hopefully here in the next day or two have a Final Fantasy VII review up on the site. It is currently my first draft was 4,000 words. And Jazz sat down and edited it and was like, hey, this seems a little much. And I'm at the point where I'm like, it is much, but I also really liked it. So I might end up doing I'll post like the full unabridged version on Patreon or something like that. But I gave her a second draft today that cut out about a quarter of it. So it's down to about 3,000 words now. So we'll see if that works or if I just completely lost the plot of the review. But that game real good, so keep an eye out on the site in the next few days for my review of Final Fantasy VII Remake, or check out the 5 hours that Cameron and I have spoken about the game over the course of a couple episodes of That Nerdy Site Show. We did a spoiler-free impressions first, and then we did a 3-hour spoiler cast with our friend Brandon Gann. So you can check out all of that over at the That Nerdy Site That Nerdy Site Show feed.
So I should play that game then? That's a game I should play?
I really enjoyed it. I put 90 hours into it. It was a good time. Lots of fun. especially if you like the well, people are very divided if you played the original game. I fall on the side of like I love what they're doing in terms of how they relate it to the original game and all that stuff. So, but it might not be for everybody. But
Fair enough.
it's definitely, I really enjoyed it. It's a good game, great combat. I had a lot of fun with it.
I like the
So
demo.
yes, it gets a hearty recommendation from me. And yeah, if you like the demo, it's definitely I would say worth checking out, even if you know whether or not you know the original story or whatever. Like
It doesn't
Yeah,
matter. Come play the
yeah.
game.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know the original story, but I've listened to enough reviews, and I don't care about spoilers, so I listen to spoiler casts. And like the
Nice.
way that they're connecting those two things sounds super fucking cool. So
Yeah, yeah. And in particular, in my review, it will be a like spoiler-free review, but there will be, because the way some of like my score is basically like built on how they tie it to things that are significantly more spoiler heavy. So I wrote the review of like, here's all the spoiler free impressions, here's the score, here's the pros and cons, and then there's like an appendix at the bottom that is here's the spoiler filled portion of why I really loved this game and gave it the score that I gave it. So so that will be out there hopefully here again in the next few days. So yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. You can see that. You can follow all of the latest from That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site or thatnerdysite.com. As I said at the top, if you would like to be on the show, you can go to thatnerdysite.com/D+guest, just like Robert
that's
did.
what I did.
And yes, and then I got back to you finally 2 months later and said, hey, let's get you on the show.
It worked. We're here.
And thank you again for kind of like repeatedly pinging me over the course of the last few months to be like, hey, is this still happening? Are we still going to do this? Because I certainly needed that, especially in like these days where it's just like sometimes it's just hard to get motivated to actually sit down and schedule some of this stuff.
Certainly.
So. But yeah, go to thatnerdysite.com/D+guest. You can fill out a quick little Google form there. Let us know what you want to talk about, and hopefully I will reach out to you and bring you on, just like we did with Robert here. If you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, and all that good stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always help support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us, Robert. Thank you for joining us, audience. And as always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.